This is 2022's Uncharted. Spoiler alert, we open up to Nathan free-falling through the air, and he just so happens to wake up as another man flies past him. Suddenly, he realizes that his foot is stuck in a cargo net, but as he reaches for it, he comes loose and tumbles past multiple shipments. Just as he gets ready to make his way back to the plane, the bad guys start to shoot at him and try to pull him off. Sure enough, Nathan manages to get the best of them, and he makes it to the cargo door just as the rope snaps. Obviously, he's not in the clear yet. A red sports car knocks him back out of the plane, and he starts to tumble to the ground. Suddenly, we go back 15 years to find Nathan being pulled onto a balcony by his brother Sam. They head into the art museum, and Sam quizzes Nathan until they find the first map of the world. Sam tells Nathan the difference between being lost and gone, and they try to steal the map. As soon as Sam tries to jimmy the lock, the alarm goes off and police show up. When the officer takes them back to the dorm, the officer states that this is Sam's third strike and it's time to go. When Nathan heads up to the room to check on Sam, he sees that he's trying to escape out the window. Sam leaves Nathan his necklace, and they hug one last time. After Sam goes out onto the rooftop, he promises to come back for Nathan, and Nathan sits on the bed to look at the invisible ink message Sam left him. You remember invisible ink and how much of a cool guy it made you feel to use it? I'm talking about the simple Dollar Tree invisible ink too. The kind you could technically see if you just held it at an angle in the right light. That dollar was well spent. In the present day, Nathan rides the subway in New York, and he heads to his job as a bartender. Nathan tries to educate a customer on proper history as he pours her a drink, but his knowledge isn't appreciated just yet. He goes out to bust the outside tables, and he continues to work his charm on her. While he keeps her distracted, he manages to lift the bracelet right off of her wrist without her noticing, and he goes back inside to keep working. It's here that he meets Sully, who seems to have noticed the whole thing. Sully tries to recruit Nathan, but Nathan tries to assure him that he's got the wrong idea about it. After Sully leaves, Nathan goes to check his pocket for the lifted bracelet, but he finds Sully's card that he slipped in instead. After work, Nathan heads to the address on Sully's card, and he finds the same map he almost stole from Sam as a child. Suddenly, Sully shows up, and he points out that the legend of the Gold of Magellan is in fact very true. He also mentions Sam by name. Oh, that's a red flag. If Indiana Jones movies taught me anything, it's that the random contact that knows more about yourself than you do is never to be trusted. Sorry, Sully. As proof that Sully was friends with Sam, he shows Nathan a picture of the two of them, and he tells him that Sam seems to have ghosted him. When Nathan mentions that he hasn't heard from him either, Sully goes back to trying to recruit Nathan. Nathan still refuses, and he heads home. Then Nathan opens up a chest with postcards from Sam. After giving it some more thought, Nathan calls Sully to tell him that he's in, and they meet up the next day to go over the next step in tracking down the gold. It turns out that Nathan has to shut off the power to an auction house so Sully can do his thing and steal a gold cross. After a nice training montage, the two of them head to the auction house during a big event. When they head inside, they notice Santiago has arrived, and Sully knows he's there for the cross as well. Once inside, Nathan notices Joe Braddock, who's talking with Santiago, and Sully tells him to leave before she gets a hold of him. Sully's keeping way too much close to his chest. Joe heads over and she talks to Sully about everything he taught her. I bet some of it wasn't family-friendly either. Meanwhile, Nathan goes to inspect the cross, and Santiago takes this chance to educate him on the bloody history of the cross. Nathan's startled, but I really can't blame him. When Antonio Banderas pops up behind you and threatens to kill you with his quiet voice, really can't say that someone wouldn't just soil themselves right there. When the auction starts, Nathan heads back to cut the power, but he's interrupted by one of Santiago's big Scottish thugs. The thug tries to talk smack with Nathan, but he can't understand a word he says. Nathan makes his way back out to the auction floor, and he causes a commotion to distract everyone while Sully goes to steal the cross. Sully leaves Nathan behind, and when he gets to the car, he finds that Nathan managed to escape without help anyways. After making up, the two of them hop on a plane to Barcelona, and they go over the journal to find the whereabouts of the treasure. Once they land, Sully introduces Nathan to Chloe, who has the matching cross. Chloe isn't too happy to see Nathan involved, and she somehow manages to steal the cross from Nathan without him knowing. After a nice parkour chase through the city, they all three manage to work together again, and they figure out that the cross keys have to sit on an altar in a specific church. They're not able to poke around inside until the next day, so they head back to a house that they're crashing in. Meanwhile, Santiago has a serious conversation with his father, who's set to give away the entire family fortune. After this conversation, Santiago tells Joe that Sully was spotted in town, and he starts to question if he hired the wrong treasure hunter. That night, Chloe talks to Sully about Nathan being Sam's brother, and she wonders when he's going to tell Nathan about what happened to Sam. Just then, Nathan wanders in with more wine, and that's the end of that conversation. In the morning, Santiago sits with his father to try and convince him to change his mind about the family fortune, but it turns out that it's too late. That night, Nathan and the crew head into the church, and they follow the clues to a downstairs room with 2 keyholes. After finding the secret tunnel, Chloe and Nathan head down to find where one cross should go, and Sully heads back up to find where the other should go. Just then, Jo spots Sully, and she sends the Scottish thugs after Nathan and Chloe. While Nathan and Chloe follow the tunnel, they come across a very modern section that leads out to a bar, and after the thugs shake down Nathan behind the bar, Chloe finds them their way out. When Chloe uses the final keyhole in the tunnel, water rushes into their chamber, and it comes down to Sully to use the keyhole. Just as he finds the keyhole in a Papa John's, Jo attacks him, and the water continues to rush into Nathan and Chloe's chamber. Luckily, Sully manages to turn the key just in the nick of time, and Nathan pulls Chloe out of the water. When Nathan finds the next room, Sully finds a drainage grate that leads straight down to them, and he drops his cross down so they can use it on the door. When Nathan and Chloe head into the room, they find giant urns full of salt, and after the urns break, Nathan finds yet another map that leads to the supposed destination of the gold. After Nathan reads the map, he finds that Chloe has a gun on him and has double-crossed him. When Chloe realizes that Nathan really has no idea about who Sully really is, she warns him that he should ask Sully what really happened to Sam. Then she knocks him out, takes the map and crosses, and leaves on her own. When Nathan wakes up, he finds Sully waiting. Of course, Nathan asks him about Sam, and the story is turned around yet again to show that Jo and her thugs shot Sam. You know what? I don't even believe that. It's all a lie. Sam could be sipping pina coladas on a beach somewhere. You know what's even better? It turns out that Santiago had hired Chloe as a reassurance. Santiago gets respect from me for sure. Later, Nathan goes back to the house to pack up, and Sully shows up to mention that Chloe has to be working with Santiago. Sully keeps trying to persuade Nathan to stick with him, but Nathan is furious about Sully's lies. Nathan wants to finish the job since it was Sam's dream too, but after that, he's going his own way. Later, Nathan and Sully head to the airport and spot Chloe and Santiago getting on their plane with all of Santiago's belongings. After the plane takes off, Santiago gives a speech about how he plans to restore order to his family, but he's cut short when Jo slits his throat. Then Jo notices that Chloe has disappeared, and she sends everyone through the plane to search for her. Little does she know that Nathan and Sully have stowed away in one of the cars. Sully grabs the map and jumps out of the plane, but leave it to Nathan to make all the cargo drop out of the plane. Now we're back at the beginning, and Chloe's having a gunfight with Jo. This whole scene is literally the trailer that we saw for months before the movie came out. Just as Nate makes his way back to the plane, Chloe runs him over with the car, and they fall. They manage to grab onto one of the cargo shipments, and they parachute down to the water below. They somehow end up floating to an island with a resort on it, and the two of them grab a room. Once they settle in, Nathan tries to go through Sam's postcards to see if he included a code in anything. At some point that night, Nathan comes up with the great idea of heating up the postcards, and he finds hidden messages in the postcards. He ends up finding the coordinates, and he leaves Chloe a message with the location before he heads to bed. Yeah, let's leave the coordinates out there for the woman with trust issues to see. This can only end positively. And look at that! She heads out and leaves him a note saying how damaged she is. Sully literally said the same thing earlier. Luckily, Nathan told her the wrong coordinates, and he heads out in the right direction. Jo spots his boat from the shore, and her thugs follow him to a cave. Nathan dives deeper into the cave, and he comes across an opening that holds 2 ships. Nathan climbs aboard one of them and he takes a look around. To his surprise, Sully shows up and tells him that he followed his GPS. But suddenly, Jo shows up with her thugs. Nathan and Sully hide away in a secret compartment, and Jo has her men get to work on extracting the ships. Suddenly, a helicopter shows up and takes off with the ships while Sully and Nathan are on board. For those of you that might think that the action and chase scenes are a little unbelievable and over the top, that's just how the games are. They literally play like a huge blockbuster film. And the scenes just get crazier from here. There's a sword fight, Sully hijacks the helicopter, and the bad guys harpoon swing from one ship to the other. It's really fantastic. As Jo's helicopter makes her way back to them, Nathan comes up with an idea for taking down the helicopter. He lights a cannon and fires a cannonball right at the other helicopter. It ends up bringing that helicopter down, and the ship with it. Sully and Nathan think that they're home free, but Jo managed to grab onto one of their ropes before her ship went down. She ends up dropping the anchor on the boat, and she tries to take Nathan down. Nathan manages to get enough distance between himself and Jo, and he climbs the mast to make it up to Sully, who's trying to grab his bag of gold. In a heartwarming twist, Sully throws the bag of gold at Jo, and he helps Nathan onto the helicopter. Then the entire ship crashes down on top of Joe. Do you think they ended up going home empty-handed? No. Nathan managed to snag quite a few gold pieces and stashed them in his pocket. Then there's a pre-credit scene? We see people rotting away in a rundown jail, and it turns out that Sam is still alive. I knew it! That's not the end, though. Thanks to Marvel movies, we get like 2 or 3 credit scenes now. Nathan shows up in a bar and he meets a man for a map. The man ends up double-crossing him, and all of the men in the bar pull out guns. Suddenly, Sully shows up, but he's sporting a fancy new mustache. As they leave the bar, they seem surprised by something, but we don't know what it is. Way to set up for a sequel. Honestly, I wouldn't mind another one of these. I was never a huge Uncharted fan, but I've played my fair share of the games. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.